Hey everybody, I just want to recommend a show that I listened to by Lee Rogers. This is his website here, roguegovernment.com. I'll put the links down in the info box. But yeah, he's on Oracle Broadcasting, I think every night of the weekday, and he's a good one to listen to. And here's some excerpts from last night's show. He touches on some interesting topics about the alternative media and how a lot of it is actually seems to be like it's spun by the same people that run the corporate media. So keep your eyes open and your ears cleaned out. So, all right, here's some excerpts from the show from last night, and I'll put the link to the actual MP3 if you want to download it.
Oh, here's a good one. More alternative media fear-mongering, and it's unbelievable. You can't even make stuff up like this. It's becoming so absurd. But literally, there was an article on Infowars.com, and it's basically an article talking about how these various food and drink products are dangerous. Okay, look, I agree. Aspartame, high fructose corn syrup, and fluoridated water, and all these various things that you hear about on a lot of these shows. I agree, look, this stuff is not good. But literally, in the article, and I quote, it says this: "The grocery store, along with your kitchen sink, are two of the most dangerous places in the world." Let me read that again. "The grocery store, along with your kitchen sink, are two of the most dangerous places in the world." That's what it says in the article. You can't, I mean, look, there's no way that you can possibly make up something so insane, but that's literally what it says. So, obviously, just an article designed to perpetuate more and more fear. And it's taken me a little while to figure this out, but if you see anybody perpetuating non-stop amounts of fear, like that's their number one thing that they do, they should immediately be considered highly suspect. In fact, I think a lot of people that are spreading fear in the alternative media are probably, and most likely, operatives of some sort. The corporate media uses fear. The government uses fear. So if you see somebody in the alternative media using fear, what makes them any different than the corporate media or the federal government? Nothing. So we'll break that down later in the show. I mean, I'm getting so fed up with this nonsense. You see, these type of things make everything that we're trying to do less and less meaningful. Because people will see this and say, oh, that's just blatant fear-mongering, and this guy's crazy. And immediately dismisses any other researchers and any other information that is available. So we'll talk about that later in the show. That's the fact that you see the Tea Party. You see how all of a sudden that group has been given all of this credibility by the corporate media. All of a sudden you see this Tea Party emerging and being recognized as a political force. And because the corporate media recognizes it as a political force, then it is a political force. You see, because these people create reality. Whatever the mainstream corporate media says, that is reality. Okay? We have to accept that as the status quo in today's society. It doesn't matter if what they say is utter nonsense and complete and absolute rubbish. If they say it is true, then it is true. Doesn't matter if you can prove it 7 ways to Sunday that it's not true. If they say it's true, it's true. And what they do is they claim that anything contrary to the official reality that is approved by the corporate-controlled media and the people who control this planet, that's a conspiracy theory, you see? But if the Associated Press or Reuters or ABC News or CNN or Fox say that's true, it's not conspiracy theory, it's fact. This is the type of insanity that we're dealing with, because what makes somebody who works for a multi-billion-dollar corporation more credible than an independent researcher? I would say nothing. In fact, I would say people who work for the big multinational corporations in many ways can be considered less credible, especially when dealing with certain particular topics or news articles. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody that works for these corporate media outlets are putting out lies or disinformation, but certainly the context of the material that they put out is put out in a completely phony manner. So it all boils down to discernment. But there are good reports that come out from the corporate media. It's just a matter of identifying if it's legitimate or not legitimate. And that, of course, is part of the challenge that we're dealing with here. But either way, you have this article that came out from the Investors Business Daily. Will Washington's failures lead to a second American Revolution? And I'll read a little bit from this. The Internet is a large-scale version of the committees of correspondence that led to the first American Revolution, and with Washington's failings now so obvious and awful, it may lead to another. People are asking, is the government doing us more harm than good? Should we change what it does and the way it does it? Proving the power of government begins with the imperial presidency. Too many overreaching laws give the president too much discretion to make too many open-ended rules controlling too many aspects of our lives. There's no end to the harm an out-of-control president can do. Bill Clinton lowered the culture, moral tone, and strength of the nation and left America vulnerable to attack. When it came, George W. Bush stood up for America, albeit sometimes clumsily. And those are lies, but of course they're presenting the article in the false paradigms that are parroted by the corporate media. You see, first of all, George W. Bush didn't stand up for America because 9/11 was clearly not what they said it was. Buildings don't collapse in 10 seconds apiece unless you have some sort of external force that is able to pulverize all of that material within that period of time. Burning jet fuel simply cannot achieve that level of destruction on its own that occurred on that day. And we could go over all the other evidence indicating that 9/11 was not what they're telling us. And it's been used to bomb a bunch of brown people overseas and to occupy lands that we have no business occupying. So that right there is a lie, but either way, again, let's continue. Barack Obama, however, has pulled off the ultimate switcheroo. He is diminishing America from within, so far successfully. He may soon bankrupt us and replace our big merit-based capitalist economy with a small government-directed one of his own design. He is undermining our constitutional traditions, the rule of law, and our Anglo-Saxon concepts of private property hang in the balance. Obama may be the most consequential president ever. And you see where they're going with this. We have to break. But basically, what they're saying is that we're getting closer and closer to a civil war scenario. More on the other side. Okay, welcome back to the show. I am reading from an article from the Investors Business Daily entitled, Will Washington's Failures Lead to Second American Revolution? And we're seeing more and more of this. More and more people in the corporate media talking about a revolution, talking about a civil war scenario. And why are they doing that? Because they hoped that by putting out this type of information, like they are, by writing articles like this, that they can enrage the individuals within the Tea Party, the Patriot community, the Truthers, the Ron Paul supporters, to be that enemy that the federal government needs to have a civil war. Because, let's face it, you need two sides to have a war. at least two sides. And so that's the goal. You have to figure out a way to get people angry on one side and set the script and the stage so you can actually have this type of conflict. Because people aren't going to fight unless there's a reason, unless there's a rationale for it. And so the rationale is that they're going to make everything in this country as miserable as possible for people who know what's going on. Anything that is against freedom, individual liberty, it's going to be promoted, it's going to be implemented. And we see this happening day in and day out. It's been happening for a very long time. And so they're going to use this to further enrage the people who know what's going on to hopefully, in their minds, foment a conflict of some type in this country. And so that's why you're seeing these type of articles come out. And I don't disagree with the premise. Will Washington's failures lead to Second American Revolution? I disagree with the context that they're presenting the argument. But I actually agree with the overall tone in that it's very possible that Washington's failures will lead to a Second American Revolution, because that's the plan. And they're trying to achieve this from many different angles. You have the illegal immigration story that's been thrust into the spotlight. And then you had protesters down there in Arizona. They're showing video of that because of that judge's ruling on the immigration law down there in Arizona. So they're putting these images out there for public consumption, trying to get people mad, trying to get people angry. So if you continue to read this article, it gets into all the ridiculous things that Obama has done. And it's not really him. He's just up there in front of the camera. And it looks like he's in charge, but he's really not. He's just there to read off of a teleprompter and to do what he's told. He is the salesman. He's the pitch guy. And it's really quite ridiculous. But basically, that is the premise of the article. It gets into Obamacare, gets into the economy, gets into all these horrendous things that have transpired, and they say that this could eventually lead to a revolt. And I don't disagree, but the fact that you're seeing this in the corporate media, I think is very interesting. And it goes to show you that they're really wanting to try to push this concept of convincing people in the Tea Party and all these other groups that a civil war or a revolution would be a good thing. And revolutions are not good things, usually. Sometimes they can end up being okay. They can end up being good sometimes. But it's unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get. You could actually get something that's worse if you have a revolution. And I've used the country of Liberia as a good example. That's a country over the past 30 or so years that has had several revolutions, several changes in the power structure as a result of civil war. And is the country of Liberia in good shape? No. Take a look at the living or the standard of living there. Take a look at what it's like to live in that country, and it's not good. Yet you've had several revolutions. So, with that in mind, any sort of violent revolution in this country may not end up as a lot of people in the patriot circles would want you to believe. Because there's a misnomer out there that if you have a violent revolution, that we'll have a restoration of the Constitution, and we'll have a restoration of the rule of law, and we'll have these good and just people that will take control and power, and that's not true. It's going to be a crapshoot as to what actually happens. And that's just the bottom line.